All right, we're taking Klumpke's palsy hopefully fairly quickly. If we start, let's have a look at the different types of palsies in your hands. So your first one, the one that we're talking about today, is Klumpke's palsy. And basically this occurs when, for example, falling out a tree, or you can picture it as when, for example, in childbirth, a baby's arm is like quite above the head and pulls on their arm, pulls on their body, basically. Their body is pulling on their arm. So this damages C8 to T1, and which is a major contribution to the median nerve. Now the median nerve, one of the functions is it supplies a muscle in the hand called the lumbricals. So you have 4 of those in your hand. And the lumbricals, they do 2 things. The less important role is they flex your MCP joints, but then the more important one is they extend your IP joints. So the joints between your fingers, they keep them nice and straight. When your median nerve is damaged, obviously they're not going to be able to keep them straight anymore. So then your fingers start to curl inwards. So you kind of get this kind of claw hand, the median claw of Klumpke's paralysis. Okay, and the other pathology you might have heard of is called Erb's palsy. That occurs when C5, C6 are have hyperabduction, basically. For example, falling off a horse, or when a baby's shoulder is stuck in childbirth. This is also called waiter's tip, because it's like a waiter's asking for a tip. And the way I remember it is that you ask your waiter to bring you herbs to your table, right? Okay, the final one that comes up quite a lot is called post-blessing. This also affects the median nerve, but we'll compare this to Klumpke's later on. But basically, it affects it lower down in the pathway, in the brachial plexus pathway. But remember, the median nerve supplies also the flexors of your arm and your hand. So your forearm and your hand. So these are the ones that kind of close your hand inwards, right? So post-blessing occurs when you ask a patient to make a fist, so to curl their hands inwards, so basically to use their flexors. And their flexor carpi radialis, for example, won't be able to work because it's supplied by the median nerve, which is damaged. However, they have another flexor on the other side called the flexor carpi ulnaris, which is supplied by the ulnar nerve, so it curls the fourth and the fifth finger inwards. So when you ask the patient to make a fist, they won't be able to curl fingers 1, 2, and 3 inwards, but 4 and 5 will curl inwards because of the flexor carpi ulnaris, leading to something called the post-blessing kind of sign. So we're talking about Klumpke's palsy today. And what did we say happened? So we said that C8 and T1 are damaged, for example, by falling out of a tree. And C8, T1, they're the major contribution to the median nerve. So Klumpke's paralysis usually affects C8, T1. So as we mentioned, the median nerve has a role in flexing the hand. So we can see extension of the hand is pulling it kind of backwards or pulling it upwards, and flexion is pulling it kind of downwards, like this. But when your median nerve is damaged in Klumpke's palsy, what happens is this won't happen. So you basically get unopposed wrist extension. So your hand is kind of backwards a little bit in this kind of orientation. Your hand is facing up like that, like kind of this slant. Okay, now we said the median nerve also supplies something called the lumbricals. So this is what the lumbricals usually do. So here you've got your MCP joint. So this is your first joint, and here you've got your IP joints. So your lumbricals, they flex your MCP joints normally. What does that mean? So they close the joint angle here. But as you can see, they keep so this is your lumbrical here, as it's contracting. It keeps the IP joints nice and straight. So it keeps this bit of the finger nice and straight, but it flexes this bit. So usually the lumbricals flex this MCP joint here, as we can see, but keep the IP joints nice and straight. So these are your lumbricals. You have 4 of them. Mainly the first 2 ones are supplied by the median nerve. The other 2 are supplied by the ulnar nerve. So yeah, when the median nerve is damaged, mainly the first 2 lumbricals, the others might be slightly affected as well, will be KO'd, so they won't be able to work. Which means basically we get the opposite of what normally happens. So instead of our IP being nice and extended and straight, we get them kind of flexing, which is basically causes our fingers to kind of curl inwards. And then we get this MCP extended. So rather than looking like this kind of L shape here, our MCP will be nice and straight. Well, not nice and straight, it will be straight. So like that, with our fingers curled like this. This is what this gives you. So if you imagine here, your first bit is your MCP, that gives you the straight bit, and then your tip of your fingers are curled inwards, and that's because your IP joints are flexed. So this is the main symptom, sorry, this is the main symptom of Klumpke's palsy, this median kind of claw hand. But it's important to note that the median nerve also receives innervation from the lateral cord, which is the C5, C6 cord as well. And so we're going to be talking about now, like, you may remember I talked about that the post-blessing sign also affects the median nerve, and I found this really confusing because they have different symptoms, but they're both affecting the same nerve. So we're going to be looking now at why post-blessing and Klumpke's paralysis have different symptoms, even though both of them affect the median nerve. So obviously the median nerve has contributions from C5, C6, and also C8 to T1. So C5, C6 is our lateral cord. And this here forms, these kind of converge to form, these roots converge to form our median nerve. And this bit here, this doesn't mean that the flexors are purely from C5, C6, but you can think of that mostly from C5, C6 with some stuff from C8, T1. So you get flexors from the median nerve. And so these are usually your flexor carpi radialis, your flexor pollicis longus, your pronator quadratus, and these form a branch of the median nerve called the anterior interosseous branch. That's kind of a low yield point. You don't really need to think about it, but just for completeness. And also another flexor is the flexor digitorum profundus. So most of these you could kind of picture as coming from the C5, C6 branch, but obviously there's a little bit of purple here to show that there is obviously some C8, T1 contributing to the flexors as well. And also one other function of the median nerve is, as well as the extrinsic muscles of the hand, your kind of flexors, we've got the intrinsic muscles, which is your lumbricals. So mainly your first two lumbricals, remember, your other two lumbricals, 3 and 4, have innervation by the ulnar nerve as well. And also this also innervates some of the flexor digitorum profundus. So you can see that we've kind of got branches of the median nerve. And so when you have a look at Klumpke's palsy, remember it affects C8 to T1, and this is quite high up, this affects the root. And so if you look at this diagram, the C8T1, the major thing that C8T1 gives off is the lumbricals, with some obviously contribution to the flexors. So when we damage the lumbricals, we get the basically we get loss of some flexors first of all. So we get the extended wrist, and then when we damage the lumbricals, we get the MCP extended. So usually the MCP should be flexed and the IP should be extended, but we get the reverse of this. So we get our MCP straight and then our IP joints kind of curling inwards. So this causes Klumpke's palsy here, because the C8T1, the major contribution of the median nerve bit is to the lumbricals. Post-blessing occurs further down, so more kind of closer towards like the elbow wrist kind of side, not really towards the neck. And it will also therefore is going to have affect the flexors much more. And so post-blessing, what it is it's called a proximal injury, because it's not exactly by, if it was exactly by the wrist, then it would be distal, but it's still a little bit high up. So for example, by the elbow, this is a proximal injury. And what happens is your flexors are not being able to work properly, apart from your flexor carpi ulnaris. So this guy is the only one that can work. And so this leads to your active sign. So when you ask them to make a fist, only your 4th and 5th fingers will be able to curl inwards, whereas 1, 2, and 3 will not be able to. So you can hopefully see why there's different symptoms now between Klumpke's palsy and post-blessing. And just finally, the median nerve also supplies thenar muscles, and they're kind of the muscles around the thumb. So your big bulge of your thumb is your thenar eminence. And these can be affected as well in kind of other diseases, so not in post-blessing or Klumpke's, but the thenar muscles can be damaged. And this can lead to your thumb not being able to work properly. So your thumb gets kind of adducted inside, attached to your fingers basically, so glued onto your fingers. So this is called ape hand, because an ape cannot oppose their thumbs, it cannot move their thumb. So when the thenar muscles are damaged, for example in a supracondylar fracture, which might be up here, so don't worry too much about the detail, that's about the post-blessing thing, but you just have to know that the supracondylar fracture will basically somehow damage the thenar muscles. And other things can damage the thenar muscles as well, and this can lead to ape hand.